Rev it up and welcome to Cars Yeah, show number 1493.
What I loved about it was this sort of challenge, I dare you, this sort of daring yourself to get out there and to be your best.
This is Cars Yeah, where you'll enjoy interviews with inspiring automotive enthusiasts. Mark Green is here to provide you with a fuel injection of automotive inspiration. So get in, sit down, buckle up, and get ready for a wild ride here on Cars Yeah.
Hello, inspiring automotive enthusiasts, and welcome to Cars Yeah. I'm revved up and so excited to share with you today a very special guest, Neal Bascomb, who's calling in from Philly, where I hear it's always sunny. So that's very cool. Neal Bascomb is the author of eight award-winning national and international best-selling books, including most recently a book that's coming out on the 17th titled Faster, 17th of March, I should say, The True Story of an American Heiress, Lucy Schell, outcast Jewish driver Rene Dreyfus, and an old, almost bankrupt automobile company known as Delahaye, who take on Hitler's Silver Arrow Grand Prix cars at the brink of World War II. Neal wrote the New York Times bestseller on the sabotage of the German atomic bomb program, The Winter Fortress. He also chronicled the search for a Nazi war criminal in Hunting Eichmann and the story of Roger Bannister's 4-minute mile in The Perfect Mile. His work has won awards, been optioned for film and features and documentaries. He's also written for the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Los Angeles Times. And like I said, he lives in Philadelphia, where it's always sunny. And guess what? 10 Cars Yeah listeners are going to win a copy of this book when it comes out in March. So make sure you go to the Cars Yeah website, click on the free book button. That'll sign you up for the drawing. Very nice of him and his publishers to do this. We'll be back in a minute to talk with Neal, but first, a word from our valued sponsors that make Cars Yeah possible. We'll be right back. Hey, Cars Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Covercraft. I've protected my vehicles with their products for decades. Want to keep your vehicle's interior looking new? It's easy with Covercraft seat covers. They'll protect your seats from the daily abuse of pets, children, weekend adventures, and even those everyday spills. It's a fast, easy, and inexpensive way to keep your vehicle looking new. All Covercraft seat covers are easy on, easy off design that are machine washable. You can choose from many fabric options, colors, and accessories, all designed and carefully sewn for your special vehicles. Their seat gloves are semi-custom fit for cars and trucks, and their seat savers, a favorite of mine, are custom tailored to fit your seats like a glove. Work truck seat covers are tough, durable denim weight fabric. It's like putting a pair of rugged jeans on your truck's seats. Want to stay warm? Covercraft also offers seat heaters. Covercraft is the right choice. Learn more today at covercraft.com and tell them Mark at Cars Yeah sent you. That's covercraft.com. Are you a Cars Yeah subscriber? If you're not, go to carsyeah.com, click on the free book button, and I'll send you my free filler up book. It's a very cool book I created of fuel filler fun, some very cool imagery, and great quotes from past guests here on Cars Yeah. Plus, you'll get my weekly email follow-up and my weekly blog. Just go to carsyeah.com, click on the free book button, and I'll send it to you right away. Thanks for subscribing. Hey, Neal, welcome to Cars Yeah. Are you buckled up and ready for a fun ride?
I'm buckled up, ready to go.
All right, we're going to have some fun here. Before we start here, could you tell our listeners, I gave a nice little bio there, but maybe a little bit more about yourself before we get rolling.
Sure. I mean, I was raised in St. Louis, raised on a hockey rink for most of my youth. I've traveled around a lot since then. I became a journalist straight out of college and lived in London for a while, and Paris and Dublin and then New York, and started writing books full-time about 20 years ago. And I write a wide range of kinds of books. My wife says that I pick them based on where I want to travel next, which I don't think is terribly kind. But there's definitely a theme of the kind of stories that attract me, that draw me. They're very much David versus Goliath stories. Stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And, this latest book of Faster with Rene and Lucy and the battle against the Germans right before World War II in the motorsport arena is sort of right down that wheelhouse of the kind of books that I love to do.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And as a car enthusiast my whole life, I've just found it wonderful. Combining the history and the stories and all this interlacing of people is really, really cool. And then what's even better than Grand Prix race cars back in the day? These cars were so incredibly dangerous and daring, and the fact that a woman was involved. I mean, everything about it is very intriguing. We're going to learn a little more about it, but also a quick another question for you here. What's one thing that most people don't know about you, Neal?
I think there's quite a bit, but I tend to keep things pretty close to the chest. A few things from my youth people don't know, and that I still sort of pursue is I collect stamps, which is kind of weird.
Nothing wrong with that. That's
not
cool.
A whole lot of people do that anymore. I used to be a computer quote unquote geek who coded in machine language and did that. But I think it's sort of most apt to maybe your audiences. That many people maybe don't know is that I love to drive. I love to drive very long distances on open roads. I got that from my mom, who couldn't be happier being behind the wheel on a highway going from St. Louis to Charleston. And it's just something that, I just did with my family in a Subaru Outback, and my 2 kids and my dog took my kids, my family cross country. And just is kind of a happy, lovely place for me is to be behind the wheel and sort of cruising across the country.
Well, we live in a wonderful country for that. There's so many beautiful places to drive. And I know I grew up back in the 60s and 70s. We used to take long road trips in our Oldsmobile Vista Cruiser. We drive from San Diego to Texas to visit my grandparents on their farm. It was like going to an alien planet for a kid who spent his youth on the beach surfing to go to a farm in the middle of Texas. But they're a wonderful way. It's kind of sad because I don't know if a lot of people do it anymore. I mean, you can jump on planes and be places so quick, but it's a great way to bond with your family. So many beautiful things to see. So I'm very happy to see that. Let's start with a success quote or a mantra, some kind of saying that's been instrumental in your life. It's a nice way to get the inspirational tires turning here on Cars Yeah. So Neal, you love to drive, grab the wheel.
I guess my favorite quote, it's kind of a seismic book for me in my youth, was a book called I Dare You by John Danforth. And it was, very self-helpy, kind of, you got to build this 4-quadrant life. You got to be intellectual, spiritual, physical, and social. But what I loved about it was this sort of challenge, I dare you, this sort of daring yourself to get out there and to be your best. And it's something that I still, whether it's, I'm venturing out in something that I don't know much about or taking on a new challenge where I kind of look myself in the mirror and say, Neal, I dare you. It sounds kind of silly, but it's one of those things that still works. And it worked when I was 16 and it's working when I'm 48. So I'm holding on tight.
No, I think it's great. Do you ever look in the mirror and say, I double dog dare you?
No, but I definitely do that with my children, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just don't put your tongue on a frozen pole.
No,
that's for sure.
Not.
No, don't do that. Well, I think it's great. Pushing ourselves outside of our comfort zones, it's cliche-ish, but it's really true. That's where the good things start to happen. They can be frightening and scary, but you know what? Nobody wants to live to a ripe old age and go, man, I wish I woulda, coulda, shoulda. And they didn't. Absolutely. So yeah, I encourage people, dare yourself every day. Don't be silly. Don't be stupid, maybe be silly, but don't be stupid, but dare yourself. You'd be amazed what you can do. I've got proof here. 1,493 guests here on Cars Yeah who dared themselves to do things. Let's talk about this book. I want you to talk a little bit more about the book. Again, it's Faster: How a Jewish Driver, an American Heiress, and a Legendary Car Beat Hitler's Best. What got you into this theme? What did you learn through the process? What excites you about this new book? And again, to our listeners, it's coming out March 17th. We're kind of wetting your whistle here, and we're going to give away 10 of these things, so make sure you go subscribe on the Cars Yeah website. Talk about Faster.
Sure. I mean, I was first drawn to the story, I guess, about 3.5 years ago, when I learned this, kind of just this tiny little tidbit about the Delahaye race car, the Delahaye 145. And it had just been out at the Concours at Pebble Beach, a restored version of it. And I learned that there was a time, soon after Hitler invaded France, where he pursued finding the 4 Delahayes that were ever built, having them destroyed. He went to the Automobile Club de France, had all the records taken out of the archives there and destroyed. And this idea that that Hitler wanted to erase the history of this race car and what it had accomplished right before the war. And that was a kind of like spark moment for me. But what was particularly fascinating to me were the individuals surrounding it. And you bring up, again, Lucy Schell, who was an American heiress. She was one of the early speed queens. She was probably the best American Monte Carlo rally driver with her husband of the time. And she decided in the mid-30s, after the Silver Arrows had sort of swept the field, that something needed to be done, that someone needed to take them on. And so she financed and ran, the first woman to do so, Grand Prix race team to take on the Germans. And she recruited to her team Rene Dreyfus, who was this really very good driver who drove for Bugatti and Maserati and Alfa Romeo. Eventually found himself sort of banned from the best teams and the best cars because he was Jewish. And he was kind of a reluctant hero in that sense. I mean, he didn't sort of wear he didn't
his
really
faith
even
on his shoulder, right?
Yeah. He didn't wear his faith. He considered himself a race car driver, and that was it. But Lucy saw something in him and recruited him. And they went with Delahaye, which, as you introduced in the early part of the show, this sort of bankrupt French automobile manufacturer who really took a big leap of faith and a chance on building a race car when they were producing, I think one critic said, cars that were best put in a funeral procession.
Yeah,
and
poor Delahaye.
And they joined motorsport again and created this line of cars that even today are considered the most beautiful in the world. So it's this multi-layered story with fascinating characters that weaves in this sort of social, political, economic dynamic of this period of time. And there's great race car scenes, but there's also great character moments. And I've written a lot of books as introduced, but this is probably one of my favorites.
Yeah, well, it's fascinating. It's interesting. It's fun. And for us car enthusiasts, it brings together so many really cool things. I always ask my guests about a big challenge or a big failure they face. I'd like to twist this a little bit towards the book faster here and have you explain or talk about what were some of the big challenges you faced as you were researching this story, because there's so many pieces of history in here and there's so many ways you could have gone down, maybe some traps, if you will, the way I think about it with history and leaning one way or the other. What were some of the biggest challenges you faced in researching this book?
Well, researching in the car, quote unquote, car world is very different than other books that I've written. Let's say I've written about, World War II sabotage story where, the British archives were deep and rich and they were public and they were available. What I learned very quickly in the car world is a lot of these papers, a lot of these stories are held in private collections. And so it becomes this sort of kind of detective work to try to plumb out who owns what papers on Delahaye, who has photographs of Lucy Schell, and also tracking down the families like Rene Dreyfus's family. So really the way that I write these books, the amount of research that I need to really tell the visceral details of what people were thinking and doing and what it looked like and what it smelled like and really put readers right there requires the kind of research that's always a bit of a risk, and there's failures along the way. You run into walls, particularly with Lucy Schell, who her two children died. They didn't leave any papers, and really going all the way to the little town that she was from and learning the local stories of what she was like. So it was all that kind of research elements that there were many challenges. And fortunately, I was able to sort of gather together quite a rich treasure of material, but it took time. It took a lot of time.
I'll bet. No doubt. Now, part of this research involved a very fun adventure I know you got to do. You got to go get a ride in one of these old Delahaye race cars, right?
I did. Peter Mullen owns one of the four, or actually owns three of the four Delahaye 145s, and Richard Adato, who part of the board at the Mullen Museum and is a great historian in his own right, took me out on a drive in the 145, this race car that I'd been writing about for 3 years, and it was just I'll remember it for the rest of my life. Just that moment of sort of flying through these orange groves and being scared out of my wits and having the wind sort of rustling through my hair and just really experiencing just maybe a half measure of what Rene would have taking this kind of ugly duckling race car to such extraordinary speeds.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, Peter Mullen and Richard Dotto have both been guests here on Cars Yeah. Of course, if you've never been to the Mullen Museum, you've got to go. It's absolutely stunning. And of course, if you can't get there, you can go to their website where they have incredible history and stories and things like that. There's other great organizations like the Revs Institute where you can go and find history on cars and so forth. So thankfully, there's these people that are preserving these really museum pieces for us to enjoy and for our heirs and people down the road to enjoy forever, because otherwise these things get lost, especially old race cars. They end up being junked and thrown away and nobody ever sees them again, and all that history is lost. So I think that's very, very cool. We're going to take a short break. We're going to thank our sponsors and we'll be right back. My favorite collector car magazine is Keith Martin's Sports Car Market. I've been a subscriber for decades. Sports Car Market is the Wall Street Journal for the enthusiast and the collector. It's your monthly must-read whether you dream of owning a collector car, have 2 cars, or 200. Sports Car Market has been around for 31 years, and it's filled with valuable articles, intelligent write-ups, and the latest auction sales. Go to sportscarmarket.com and subscribe today. Plus, you'll get the exclusive SCM guide to restoration shops included for free. At checkout, use the code CARSYEAH and receive a 50% discount on your digital subscription. It's an exclusive offer from me here at Cars Yeah. I'm Mark Green, and I love Sports Car Market magazine. Are you looking for a way to get your products or services into the ears of thousands of automotive enthusiasts around the globe? I can help. This is Mark Green here at Cars Yeah. And I'd be honored to be an influencer and ambassador for your brand in a unique and personal way. 5 days a week, thousands of subscribers and listeners enjoy the Cars Yeah podcast and website. Contact me today and I'll show you how at mark@carsyeah.com or connect with me through the Cars Yeah website at carsyeah.com. If you're listening to Cars Yeah, you've probably spent some time working on your favorite ride. But how confident are you working on your finances? You may be able to rebuild a fuel injection system, but can you decipher the details of a mutual fund? If you're like me, investments, insurance, annuities, budgeting, and other financial concepts may seem a bit daunting, but what if I told you there's a book that describes these subjects and more in an easy-to-read and a very humorous way? My friend Chris Kimball, CFP, a longtime sponsor and past guest here on Cars Yeah, has written that book, and it's titled The Saga of Ike and Penny, a couple's humorous journey through the confusing world of finance. It's a fun look at things you need to know, everything from investing to effective ways to get rid of credit card debt, and it's probably the only book on finance with a VMAX on the front cover and a classic Mini Cooper on the back. The book's available at Amazon for just $10, and this book will dramatically improve the direction of your financial future. I gave copies to each of my children. All securities are through Money Concepts Capital Corp. Christopher Kimball Financial Services is not affiliated with Money Concepts Capital Corp. Get your copy, The Saga of Ike and Penny, today. All right, we're back, and I would love for you to share a little bit about your automotive journey. Maybe share a story that instigated your personal passion with cars. Maybe it was younger. Maybe it was an older when you got into this book. But tell us a pivotal moment in your life when you knew, you know what, I think I might be a car guy.
Yeah, I mean, I really think it was in the course of researching and riding faster that I became a quote unquote car guy. And I find that way in many of the stories that I tell. You know, when my first book was about the skyscraper war in New York in the 20s, and I really wasn't an architecture guy until I began investigating those people. And it's really, you know, the individuals that excite me. And going into this research of Grand Prix racing, learning about the history of it, learning about these beautiful cars, walking the courses, I became a convert, you know, in many ways, really beginning to see these cars as not only just sort of vehicles, but as kind of works of art in many senses. And faster is, you know, tells the story of these people and uses cars as kind of the vehicle for that, just like you would, a World War II story about a B-29 Superfortress bomber. It's about a plane, but it's really about the heroes who flew it. That's my sort of where I became a car guy. I think the first time I really thought about the beauty of cars was much earlier. My grandmother, Helen, had a beautiful, beautiful 68 ruby red convertible Mustang and would take me driving in it. And I always just was exhilarated by that. And it's the kind of one of the very sad things from the family was when she sold it off. And we still talk about that car.
Yeah. Well, it's very cool. One of the neat things about the book, I love the illustration on the front. It's very 30s, 40s artists, like you see some of these wonderful old posters. Tony Singer, who's a good buddy of mine and friend of mine, has vintageautoposters.com website where he sells authentic old posters from these old races. And the artist here, Christina Snyder, who did your cover illustration, I think did a fantastic job of that sense of speed and that era of design, which is very, very cool. Do you have a special vehicle in your life, a first really special vehicle? It doesn't have to be anything fancy. Just it was something special for you.
Yeah, Mark, and I just, before I answer that, I want to say, I'm so glad that you pointed out that sort of cover faster, like we were going exactly for that Art Deco look.
You nailed it.
Period. And I'm absolutely just thrilled.
I could see posters being made that look like that. Most definitely, because I'd hang that in my garage for sure.
I'm sure my mother will make a poster. She does it quite frequently for these books. But bringing you back to your car, the first car I ever owned, it's kind of like your first, right? You always remember it. I owned again, this is not a car you would buy anymore. But the deal with my family was that if I got a full ride to college, that they would buy me a car. It was a very clever ploy by my father to not pay for college.
I had to sell my fancy cars to pay for college. Dang, your dad was a lot smarter than me.
He was very smart, and he didn't have a lot of money, but they bought me a Suzu Impulse, which this is back in 1989. So I was it kind of had a dash like a spaceship. And that was probably what sort of captivated me. It wasn't a terribly well riding car, but it was mine. I had it for 5 years. I went to college in it. Picked up my first girlfriend with it. Drove out west in it. Sold it for when I moved to London and used that cash. So it's just kind of the car that got me started. Yeah. And I hold it sort of close.
Of course. Well, here's a bit of an introspective question for you, Neal, and I'm curious when you answer this to have you think this way, if your answer maybe has changed after writing this book faster. I ask all my guests this question. If you woke up tomorrow and you were a vehicle, you were actually manifested as a vehicle, not what you want to be, but how you perceive yourself as a vehicle, what would Neal be and why?
I've listened to a few of your casts here.
I've got some interesting answers.
I knew this question was coming.
It's an odd one.
And so I kept thinking, it'd be so great to be a Jaguar or, a Porsche. But I think the car, and again, this may be a strange answer, but a friend of mine, very good friend of mine in France had this car. And I remember I first rode in it and I just felt like it just made sense to me. And it felt sort of like it was, how best to describe it? It was kind of like stepping into a part of myself. And that was a Citroen SM.
Oh, wow.
Which, is a pretty sharp looking car.
Maserati engine.
But not too sharp, it's sort of fast, but not too fast. It's kind of refined, but not like outlandish. And I sort of I feel like those qualities or those characteristics sort of tether well with my personality. And I remember loving that car. And so it may be a little wish fulfillment, but I would say a Citroen SM.
I like that answer. And I like the reason why. I have a good friend who was a very early guest here, Kenji Yoshino. He actually has a business in Seattle where he sells Citroen parts all over the world.
Wow.
Kind of interesting, a guy that grew up in Japan, fell in love with French automobiles and especially a very unique automobile like that. And he I would often tease him about them a little bit because I'm a German sports car guy, and he would always take me for rides in his different Citroens, and it was like riding in a cloud. It was just they're really interesting cars, and they're so unique and innovative and different. And in fact, my wife and I have been watching the series The Crown. And last night, the show we watched, they had gone to France to bid farewell to the king, the once king who abdicated the throne for love and was banished to France. And they were driving up in the Citroens. And I think the reason I like this show is not so much the show, it's the cars, because they have all these interesting, fun, old cars through time. So nicely done, my friend. Well, Neal, we're entering the last lap. I'm going to fire off a series of questions and ask you to give our listeners some very quick blips of that Citroen throttle. So here we go. Will you share one of your personal habits you believe has contributed to your success as a book writer?
I would say coffee. Lots of coffee. I kind of wrap my days around it. I get 4 cups a day, and I'll do about 200 words per cup of coffee, and so it's my regimen.
I've heard this. I've had many hundreds of authors on this show, and many of them talk about you just got to sit down and write, even when you don't feel like you just have to do it. Now, in your case, coffee helps you do that, I would imagine.
Yes, it does. It's kind of like it's a ritual in many ways. It's sitting down again, like you have the blank screen and you take that sip of coffee, and it's kind of gets you where you need to be, sort of in a mental state. I used to have a much worse habit years before with cigarettes, but I've abandoned those, so I've left with coffee.
Thankfully so. Yeah, those things are nasty. They'll get you. So I'm glad that you beat that one. I had to do the same thing. I have what's called a reading chair here, and I go there to read. I for some reason I just can't read anywhere else. It's my place to go and focus, close the doors, put some soft music on in the background, and I just enjoy that space. That's like my private time to enjoy a great book. So
that's lovely.
Yeah, if I could arrange for you to have a drink or a meal with anyone in the automotive industry, I kind of think I know how you might answer this, but we'll see. Living or deceased, who would it be? I
would say, I think you got it right on the head. I would say Lucy Schell or Rene Dreyfus. I mean, I've really spent 3 years with them, reading about them, writing about them, but of course never got to meet them. And I would love to just enjoy a laugh with them, but B, I want to make sure that I got it right. So I would love to be able to sort of plumb their thoughts and spend some time with them.
Wouldn't that be marvelous to be able to bring them back and sit and listen and see how you perceive them versus who they are? It's kind of like people that we hold in high esteem, and then we meet them. Many times they're better than what we think, sometimes not as good. But it's interesting to go through that process because we have this thought process in our head of who these people are. I wish I could do that for you. Yeah, it'd be really cool. I always ask my guests about best automotive advice. I'm going to twist this a little bit to book writing advice for people out there that want to write books, want to try. And I always tell people, sit down and write. You don't have to write a book, but sit down and write down your thoughts. It's like journaling, I guess they call it. It's an amazing practice. You'd be amazed what comes out. My father used to always give me these journals to write in. He said, don't even worry about what you're writing. Don't even make sentences. Just write. So
that's great.
What would you offer? Yeah, what would you offer as far as best book writing advice?
Passion, I think, is probably foremost. I think you have to choose, I write nonfiction, so I will only sort of follow subjects or stories that absolutely invigorate me, and then I have to know more, and I have to know the people. And I would say similarly, if you're writing fiction, you have to the story almost has to burst out of you. And so I think it's really a question of choosing your subjects or your story wisely and starting there. And then, I have lots of advice, but none of it's probably fairly useful. I think writers, like your father would say, writers need to write and start there.
Drivers need to drive, artists need to draw and paint, and writers just need to write, and piano players need to play. So
exactly.
Yeah, practice. How about a great resource? Is there one, a go-to maybe for you? This could be a website you like, could be an app you use every day, could be a person in your life, a supplier, some kind of great resources that you found useful for what you do?
Well, I'd have to say my favorite site, at least for writing faster, was this website called the Golden Era of Grand Prix Racing. Leif Snellman has it, and it's sort of this weird Finnish address, so I won't say that. But if you Google Golden Era of Grand Prix Racing, every race in the 30s is documented there. The cars, the lap times, little narrative accounts of each race, the rules, the regulations at a particular time, the tracks, just everything. I mean, he's collected this absolute treasure trove of a resource for this golden era of Grand Prix racing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great site. Now, I always ask my guests for a book they would recommend. Obviously, today I'm going to be recommending Faster by my guest today, Neal Bascomb. It's just a tremendous book. And again, I want to remind you listeners, if you want a chance to win a copy, go to my website, click on the free book button. I'll send you my free Filler Up ebook, and your name will be in the hat to win one of 10 books that his very nice publishers, Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, are going to be offering to my listeners today. So make sure you do that. But is there maybe a book that you haven't written that you might recommend that people pick up and read that you really enjoy? It doesn't have to be about cars.
Sure. One of the most recent ones I read, and I was talking about it the other night, is this book called Captain Class by Sam Walker. And it's really sort of an investigation of what makes sports teams succeed. His definition of it is these remarkable captains that they have. And it's this sort of both a statistical sort of insight into what the great teams of history are, but also who the captains were that led them. And it's this mix between, sports history, but also business guidance. And it's just a really very smart, well done book.
Awesome. Great. I'll make sure I put links to that book. And of course, as soon as Faster's out, which will be March 17th, you can get that book either as an ebook or a hardcover when it comes out in March. But you can sign up to win one too. So give it a shot. You never know. All right. We are up to the checkered flag here, Neal. This last question could be a bit of a doozy. Today, I'm going to buy you any cool collector car on the planet, park it in your garage for you to enjoy. But there are a couple rules here because I'm writing the check. One is you can't sell it to buy a bunch of other pencils to write with or whatever you might want to spend your money on. You have to keep it, and I want you to drive it. So no garage queens here. But here's the kicker. It's the only one collector car you can have in your garage, so you need to choose wisely. What can I buy a writer like you today?
Well, I would steal Sam Mann's Frenet-bodied Delahaye 145. He owns it in New Jersey. It's this beautiful swooping lines, baby blue body on the 145 race car chassis and the engine. I mean, the engine, the V12 on it just sort of makes your heart sort of batter, thump in your chest. It's just a beauty and also a powerful car.
Yeah, I know that car. Yeah, it's beautiful. Just absolutely beautiful. I'll tell you, the Delahayes, for you listeners that aren't real familiar with that brand, go out and do a little research. They're just magnificent looking vehicles, despite maybe their rough days and the days when they were building them and so forth. But they're just some of the most beautiful. And of course, Frenet body, some of these cars were chassis built and different people built the bodies and put them on them. They were really, really stunning. So I'd be happy to park that car. Yeah, I'm going to have to steal it from Sam, most likely, when he's not looking. Yeah, I'll have him on the show, and while we're recording, I'll send somebody over to pull out of his garage. So
I think that's a heist we could pull off, Mark.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, you find me in jail for that one. But happy to do it for you, Neal. Happy to do it for you.
Thank you.
I think this is great. You're welcome. Well, listen, you've taken us on a very faster ride. I like the way you plugged that book there. Here at Cars Yeah today. This has been really fun to get to know you and to be able to read your book and enlighten my guests with this. I know that you listeners are going to love this book because it just has such a wonderful, as I keep saying, interlacing of history and people and experiences. And I really know, Neal, you've done a wonderful job of taking us there. I mean, I could feel the wind in my face and the excitement of these races as I read your book. So I really want to thank you for being a guest here today. Before I let you go, though, would you offer us one little parting piece of wisdom or guidance before you drive off into the sunset there in Philly in that beautiful Sam Mann's Delahaye?
Well, I'll steal a bit of a Ferrari quote, and it's actually the dedication to Faster. And I dedicated it to my two daughters, Charlotte and Julia. And it's, may you embrace life's fearful joys.
Mm.
And, just getting them. A great teacher once told me never to make a decision one way or the other out of fear. And I think this Ferrari quote sort of says that and takes it to another level, which is, some of the best things in life are scary. The job you want, the love you want, the friends you want, the adventure you want. So just take the leap.
Yeah, absolutely. What a great thing. A nice dedication to your daughters as well. I've got a daughter. They're very special. So you were fortunate to have two in your life, which is very cool. What's the best way for our listeners to learn more about you? Do you have a website? Are you active on social media?
Sure. The website is nealbascomb.com, nealbascomb.com. And I'm also on Facebook and on Twitter.
There you go. I'll make sure to put links to all those on Neal's show notes page on the Cars Yeah website. Follow this guy along. Get a copy of the book when it comes out. Again, Faster is coming out. It's a 368-page hardcover edition book on March 17th, 2020 from our friends at Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. Also going to be in an ebook, which my wife is walking around with ebook earbuds in her ears all day. I think it's so she didn't have to listen to me talk all the time, but she loves listening to books that way. I do as well. It's great. Listeners, again, you can find everything on Neal's show notes page on the Cars Yeah website. Neal, Neal, as he said, Bascomb, Bascomb, is the spelling of his name. Neal, thanks for being so generous today with your time, your expertise, your sharing the experiences. Next time you go drive in one of those Delahayes, take me along. I would love to have Rich drive me in one of those cars, although, he can be very spirited, but he knows what he's doing. Until you and I talk again, my friend, I'll see you down the road.
Thanks, Mark. It was lovely.
You're welcome. Hey, Cars Yeah listeners, this is Mark Green. If you love the Cars Yeah podcast, I have something new for you. I've teamed up with Keith Martin, a collector car market expert and the editor of Sports Car Market Magazine, to create the Buy, Sell, Hold podcast. Buy, Sell, Hold is the essence of collecting. Together, we take you on an educational ride into the collector car market, talking with industry experts, helping you navigate your collector car journey so you know when to buy, sell, hold. We talk with seasoned experts who buy, sell, and hold investment vehicles, and they'll share their insider secrets on how they make their buying decisions when it comes to making these important investments. You'll find the Buy, Sell, Hold podcast on the Cars Yeah website, on the Sports Car Market website, and if you're a podcast app subscriber to Cars Yeah, Buy, Sell, Hold will come right to your mobile device, just like the Cars Yeah podcast. Automatically. Join Keith Martin and me on a great new venture on the Buy, Sell, Hold podcast today.
Thank you so much for joining us on today's ride here at Cars Yeah. Drive on over to carsyeah.com to find show notes and inspiring automotive fun. Download your free copy of Filler Up, a fun book filled with gorgeous photographs of fuel filler fun, including quotes from more inspiring automotive enthusiasts. Download your copy today, and we'll see you next time on Cars Yeah.